Hello, hello. Welcome, leaders. Please do me a favor. I want to make sure that you can actually hear me and see me. So drop me a note in the chat letting me know if this is coming through loud and clear. I'm trying to check on my end as well. Oh, let's see if this is working. Okay, it looks like we are live. So let's go. Now, this is going to be available as a recording. Okay, thank you so much, Shervelyn. Thanks, Melissa. Thank you. I know there's a little bit of a delay, but we're going to make the best of it. And I don't know where you are, but I'm in Southern California and in the Los Angeles area. And, things have been wild out here. But it is really, really cold out, like even cold. It's cold not just for us, but cold for other parts of the country. I don't know what it is right now, but it had to be in the 40s this morning. So we're going to warm things up and get our conversation going. Thank you so much for joining live, for everyone who's here. If you're watching the recording, I hope you get everything you need out of this. So this conversation today is on the 5 protocols to align really any team quickly, but more importantly, to get your career back on track as well and your leadership back on track to where you feel like you're ahead and not like things are so difficult. So I want to ask, so I'm curious for those of you who are here live, does it feel like no matter how many meetings and check-ins and follow-ups you do, somehow there's still something missing in terms of clarity? Everyone is still not on the same page. And again, it doesn't matter how many meetings and follow-ups and checklists and all the things, but it seems like there's still some level of disconnect, right? Some level of disconnect. And just know, this is a common but unnecessary experience for leaders. And I wanted to do this session because it's so important that you not relegate your leadership and how you show up and how you drive and develop your teams or your company to winging it. And I know, we all need the ability to wing it. So don't get me wrong. I'm not, shortchanging the importance of being able to roll with things and be adaptable and be quick on your feet. But that is reserved for when you don't have a strategy or protocol or method or approach in place to address the challenge. Now, if there are things that you are already, are already coming, already need to be addressed, those simply need to be strategies that you lean on time and again. Let me know if that makes sense. Right. So it's not about that there's anything wrong with winging it. The problem with winging it is it's relying on a reactive part of your brain. Whereas strategy, on the other hand, and having protocols and proven approaches that you continue to use over and over and over again as different things pop up, those are made with the best part of your brain, right? Your prefrontal cortex. Those are that's actually where we go when we're being strategic and intentional and smart and intuitive and all of those things, as opposed to, right, when we feel under the gun and we're reacting in the moment. Again, we need to be able to do that as well. And I know a lot of the folks in my kind of environment are in healthcare. You need to be able to do that as well. But what we want to do is reserve your best thinking, right? Knowing that you have the day-to-day managed, that you're not giving away your nights and weekends just to have a semi-functioning team, right? Give me a yes in the chat if that resonates. Because right now, whatever you're doing, and I'm assuming if you're joining this session right now, there's something you see could be better in the way that your team is operating. And again, I saw, Shervelin, I saw you make a note about, it's an issue at work and on the boards you serve on. Absolutely. I work with boards, and I'll mention this in a moment as well, but there are, it's always interesting to me how I will ask either the CEO or the board president or whatever the case is, whether everyone is 100% clear on what the priorities are, what their individual priorities are, and what their organizational or group priorities are. And the answer is yeah, everybody's aligned, everybody's on the same page. And of course, what happens when I actually pull them aside and have the conversation one by one? Clearly, they were not aligned. And one of the things that happens is we believe that just because we said it, they got it. So again, we're going to get into this. I'm going to get started, but I want you to understand how important it is to not wing it when it comes to being able to manage your team and the outcomes that they create and that you create, right? The more time you spend winging it and being reactive, the less time you're actually being strategic and intentional. And odds are, like a lot of the clients who I end up working with, you've also been maybe neglecting your own career advancement and development because you're like, okay, this is the last time I'm going to work through the weekend. This is the last time I'm going to do that. And then we're going to, have it in order. Or I promise I'm not going to, be checking in while I'm on vacation. I promise this is the last time I'm going to do it. But you've come to the point where you recognize that's simply not accurate, right? You're not being, at some point that you're not being honest with yourself. So with that, let me get this up on the screen and make sure that you all can see it. Okay. So it looks like you should be able to see my screen right now, and we're going to get going. Now, the bottom line, and what I really want you to understand is that leadership really shouldn't feel so hard. That's it. We've come to the point where I think a lot of my clients before working together were under the kind of misguided belief, and understandably, right, that maybe they're not cut out for this. Maybe this is not the career that they should have stepped into. And I understand why that might feel like the case. But I hope that by the time we get through our conversation today, and again, this is going to be very interactive, so make sure, I'll remind you in a moment, but have a notebook out, have something to take notes on, whether it's digital or on paper. But you're going to be taking some action as a result of the conversation we're having today. It should not feel this hard. Right? Leadership, once you get into that leadership role, it should be about elevating your team and elevating your sites. So you're paying attention at a more strategic level. But what a lot of leaders find is they stay down here in the weeds, and I need to get you out of the weeds. There are many reasons you might be in the weeds, and we're going to get you out of those weeds because you cannot stay there and be sustainable, have a sustainable career and be effective as a leader, bottom line. And your team cannot thrive and work top of license or be effective when you are also in the weeds, right? Because there's nobody looking out for them up here. There's nobody building relationships in the rest of the organization so that the organization actually understands what your team does and the value you bring. Or whether you're the company owner, if you're the one who is now spending time micromanaging your team, who are you not paying attention to? You're not paying attention to your clients. Yes? You're not paying attention to your stakeholders, maybe even your shareholders. It is important, and it shouldn't feel this hard. So here's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about Sorry about that. I think you guys lost my sound for a second there. So let me see if I can get this to do what I want it to do. Okay, one second. Okay, there we go. You should still be able to hear me loud and clear. So we're going to talk about the 5 protocols. They're super simple, but not to be underestimated. And then we're going to talk about Q&A and next steps. And again, this is meant to be active. So this is not just me, talking to the screen. Sound good? So here is what I want to know from you. Again, does it still feel, and I mentioned this right up front, but does it still feel like your team is constantly misunderstanding priorities? Do you feel trapped? Like you're in a constant cycle of being in meetings, etc. But again, issues are still unresolved, or then you're having the meeting after the meeting because things still weren't addressed in the meeting, even though you thought that you had a clear agenda and what you're going to talk about. Are you starting to wonder again if the only way to keep this job is to trade in your personal, emotional, well-being, whatever the case is? And again, this is a constant and shared experience. So don't feel bad if that's you. So I'm going to walk us through the 5 protocols. Let me make this a little bit larger so that you all can see this more easily. So the 5 protocols, as I mentioned, they really are deceptively simple, but they're incredibly powerful. So they include clarity. You need a protocol for ensuring that you are being clear, because a team that doesn't have clear direction, as you've probably already discovered, they're just destined for chaos. And you're destined for chaos, and you're destined for overworking and nights and weekends. Communication is the next, because effective communication, I've said this in the past, you can't over-index on communicating well. Effective communication is what drives your team's ability to work together and get things done. Accountability. Ownership is what gets you results, right? And actually allows you to take vacations. Culture and values, because what your team believes about your team, about your organization, about your leadership is what dictates how they show up and how they make decisions. I'll wait. I was about to get into this, but I have a slide and we're going to get into that. But I really want you to think about what it looks like when cultures aren't aligned with what the organization would like to have you believe, or what you'd like to believe the culture actually is. Okay, and finally, continuous development, because growth is not optional. It's not a nice to have. It is, in fact, a requirement, and teams that don't grow and adapt, they just cease to exist, right? That's the bottom line. So again, each protocol is so simple in its concept, but it's so powerful when it's applied consistently. And honestly, I sometimes think it's the simplicity that has us overlook it, because we're like, oh yeah, I know that already. Let me know if that resonates. Drop me a quick yes or thumbs up or whatever the case is. But drop me a yes in the chat if that sounds familiar, that when things feel so simple, we don't stop to question whether that may be what's missing, because it seems so simple. Like we had this handled a long time ago. So I'm going to get into the first protocol here. And this one is, it's clarity. You need to give your team a clear target, whatever that is for you. I once worked with a leader, and we had several conversations about this until we realized what the problem was. But she assumed that her team knew their priorities. But when we asked her employees, again, just like I did with the boards, to name their number 1 goal, the answers were all over the place. Right? Nobody had the same 2 answers. And that's what happens when clarity is missing. So just because you said it doesn't mean they got it. And just because you know what you meant when you said it doesn't mean that was the understanding they got when you delivered it. Yeah? Gallup tells us that 50% of employees aren't sure what's expected of them. This is half of your team, half of your organization potentially going in the wrong direction. I want you to really think about that for a second. 50%. And you know what's worse? I realize this number has to be this high because employees are not willing to raise their hands and necessarily out themselves as not understanding what's expected of them. Or the leader speaks in such a way that perhaps the employee feels like they'll be seen as inept or, dummies or less than if they actually ask more questions. But I want you to consider 50% of employees aren't sure of what's expected of them. Now, you might be thinking this is absolutely not the case on my team, but I'm going to invite you to sit in that anyway, in that possibility. Where might there be a disconnect? Because clarity really is about consistent, straightforward goals and clear role definition. When each person knows their role and understands what they're on the hook for and how success is measured, and that's an important one, and sees how it ties back to that larger objective, then of course performance is going to go the direction that we want it to go. Okay, so I want you to do a quick kind of self-assessment here. Let me move this back over. Now, I want you to be really honest. I want you can rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 5, or you can just give yourself an honest yes or no. But do your team members know their top priority at any given moment? Do they get it? Do they know it? Will they give the same answer as you? Have you clearly outlined roles and responsibilities so that there is zero confusion about who owns what and who has decision authority for different functions that you manage? Or does it turn out that everybody thinks you're the only one with decision authority and needs to run literally every single thing by you? So I want you to rate yourself honestly. And if you hesitated on either of those questions, then just know it's an opportunity for improvement. It's not an indictment against your leadership. It is, one of those blind spots that you now effectively cleared away. So let me know if this is resonating. You can drop me your questions or comments in the chat as we go. But I want you to write down one specific action that you'll take to improve clarity for your team. One specific action. It could be a micro action. It can be at your very next meeting, starting the meeting with this week's priorities are, whatever makes sense for your group. So you struggle with the second point. I see Shervelyn's comment in the chat. And that is, are roles and responsibilities crystal clear to everyone? Yeah, there's really no way to be effective without that being a yes. It needs to be a yes, because here's what happens when it's a no. This is when you get to your desk, to your office, log on, whatever the case is. You have this amazing set of to-dos and priorities for yourself for the day. Yes. But come noon or 1 o'clock, you haven't gotten to any of them, because as soon as you got to your desk, there's a line of people at your desk or in your Slack or whatever the case is, waiting to get your blessing on something because they believe or simply don't have the clarity to make those decisions. So again, if your best laid plans keep getting waylaid, it's probably because of this. And that is so critical. What conversation do you need to have? And does the conversation start with yourself? Is that you simply don't have 100% clear roles and responsibilities for each of your team members? Because that is critical. I'm going to go on to the next one. But again, do write down that one specific action you'll take to improve clarity. I'm going to go on to communication. You got to keep the conversation flowing. I know that sounds kind of, gimmicky or something, but here's the thing. When conversation flows, everything gets easier. Meetings are shorter. Priorities are clearer. Misunderstandings disappear, right? You stop having the meeting after the meeting. A McKinsey report actually showed that better communication boosts productivity 20 to 25%. I don't know about you, but 25% increase in productivity without working more, and in fact, probably working less because there's clarity there. It's a game changer for any leader. Imagine getting 25% of your time back. That is dramatic. And in fact, I realize I have a whole different item that I spelled out here, but effective team communication and collaboration increases retention 4.5 times. So again, speaking to my leaders in healthcare and other areas where you tend to have higher turnaround or longer lead times for filling certain roles, imagine increasing retention in those hardest to fill lead times, because people feel like they know where they're going and not like they're simply busy but directionless. You know that experience of being like, you're always busy, there's always something to do, but you're not entirely sure you're ever going to get there wherever there happens to be. And as soon as you realize there's no there, that's when it starts to feel like we're on that hamster wheel. Yes? Anyway, and again, this several other things fold into this. Clearly, having a clear enterprise strategy, having clear alignment within your team, and then communicating that consistently so that everybody remembers where they're going and why. That's so incredibly important. So a couple questions for you to do some, soul searching for yourself. Right, another quick self-check. Does your team have a regular rhythm or cadence for sharing information? Not just receiving information, but sharing information, like your weekly huddles. And are they effective, without information overload? If not, what's one step you can take to improve that, to allow there to be two-way, to handle more business in that team meeting so that you're not having more one-offs? And in fact, for those of you here who are already on my list and my community of leaders, you probably know, if you're on my list, you're going to be getting a free 30-minute team meeting protocol. It's like, 18, 20 pages, and it's very specific on how to run your meeting in 30 minutes and get exactly what you need out of it and deliver exactly what your team needs. So if you need to be on my list for that. So if you're not, I'll tell you how to get on my list. But for those of you who are here, you are going to get that after the session. Now, the other piece is, are you comfortable delivering tough feedback in a way that actually leads to improvement instead of resentment or disengagement, right? That has people feel like the feedback is a learning opportunity versus an opportunity to make them wrong. This is so critical as leaders. And I know, criticism is one of the first things that we learn. And it's interesting because as much time as we spend criticizing, we know and we feel that it doesn't actually work, because it doesn't work on us, but it's still not enough to keep us from leaning on that. So we need a better way to communicate that results in growth. And again, this is something that once you figure it out, you'll simply keep on doing it. You don't need to reinvent the wheel every time. You don't need to wing it. You don't need to end up avoiding the conversation because you're afraid you're going to ruffle feathers. So go ahead and rate yourself, either a scale of 1 to 5, 5 being best, or that just very frank yes or no. And if these questions kind of spark ideas or concerns, or even, I don't know if that will really work in my environment, jot it down. Jot it down. Because we'll have time for questions at the end. And one of the things that I really like to delve into when I have conversations like this is why you think it wouldn't work in your environment. For one, it not only opens my eyes in the event there really is an exception that I need to find an alternate solution for, but more importantly, it actually helps us clear a way if truly there is a roadblock there, or if it's simply a matter of reframing how you think things work in that space, right? Because oftentimes, once we have the conversation, we'll clear away whatever those questions were that had you believe it might not work in the environment. And we'll get to some specific, ways of approaching it. So really, this is your chance to pinpoint areas that need better communication. Okay. The next is accountability. Ownership drives results. Right? Ownership drives results. high accountability cultures are 2.5 times more likely to be top performers. So think about it. When everybody knows what they own and is willing to take that on, 2.5 times more likely to be top performers in their industries. And same thing goes for teams in your organization. So consider when people are willing to own, let's say, the client experience, the patient experience, as opposed to fumbling a handoff because they don't want to do it or think somebody else should be doing it, or it's technically in somebody else's job description, even though they could have managed it in less time than handing it off. Can you see how much more peace of mind not only you get back as the leader, but what kind of patient or customer outcomes and client experience do you create when that ownership starts to come through in every interaction? Again, there needs to be clarity around what your expectations are, right, for accountability. So a couple of questions for you to do that quick check-in with yourself. Do you track commitments openly and visually? Right? Is it visible? And is there a respectful, effective process? For missed deadlines, work that is not up to par, etc. One of the things I see happens with a lot of leaders is that when there is a missed deadline or work is done incorrectly or ineffectively, they will go to it being personal. If that person respected me more, they would have done it correctly. They would have paid more attention. They would have been more attentive. They would have double-checked their work before sending it to me. We turn it into some sort of strange, kind of battle of the wills. It is not that, right? That's not what that is about. Accountability is about people understanding their tasks, your expectations for why they own it. And again, if they're not willing to own it to that extent, which, that may sometimes be the case, then simply understanding what the consequence is. But it's not about taking it personally and having it hijack how you show up and how you lead and your ability to be effective for the rest of the day or week. So let me know if that resonates, if you've ever worked with leaders who, again, take opportunities to learn and turn them into opportunities to punish, or take opportunities to learn and turn them into opportunities to make you wrong. You know that that is not effective, so you want to have a clear way to approach accountability. What's that going to be? There's so many different ways that you can approach that. All you need is one. Now, culture. Yes, even if you're on a small team, before anybody asks, you still need a protocol and an approach for ensuring that your culture is real. Right? Culture really is an invisible driver. Right? Deloitte says that 95% of executives believe a distinct culture is crucial for success. And it has to be a distinct, positive, empowering culture, yes? But so many organizations have values that are only words on a poster, words on the, break room wall. You want to know, and you need to know this as a leader for your own career and for your team, but how to distinguish what are espoused values, right? The values on that break room wall versus enacted values, the values that actually tell you where your organization is investing, what they actually deem to be important, who gets promoted and who gets the resource and who has the influence. Do you understand what I mean? Because organizations can tell you that one thing is important. And in fact, I'll use inclusion, being inclusive and creating a sense of belonging. They will talk about how important that is, but there's no mechanism for employees to give feedback without then somehow getting dinged or having it come back on them for providing that transparent feedback. You get me? So that's where you have the disconnect between the like espoused values or culture and the actual culture. Real culture is lived every single day. They're the behaviors that people see consistently and that they feel and they're walking through the hallway. So when your values are clear and reinforced, and there doesn't have to be one certain set of values, but it's whatever you say your organization's about. When that's reinforced, you create that unified environment where the team feels committed to those beliefs and principles, because you actually, how is it? Walk the talk. Yes. So let me know if this is resonating. And of course, feel free to drop me questions in the chat as we go. So a couple of questions for you to do a quick check-in. Are your core values actually defined and lived daily, right? Not just something listed on your annual report. Are they actually defined and lived daily? So if I were to secretly observe your team's behavior and maybe even your own decision-making and interactions, what would I conclude are your core values? What would I say is the culture? What would you want me to conclude? Right? And that's the gap you want to pay attention to. Does your leadership team address toxic behavior quickly and proactively to protect your culture? I want you to walk away from here knowing when it comes to culture and values, your leadership is and will continue to be reflected by what you tolerate. It's going to boil down to that lowest common denominator of what you're tolerating in the workplace. It doesn't matter that you say hello to everybody every morning. It doesn't matter that you're clear in your team meetings if you're allowing one of your other leaders or team members to leave a wake of bodies in their path. You guys with me? So important. Your leadership is going to boil down to what you tolerate. So think about a real life example you've seen in your organization where either toxic behaviors aren't addressed quickly or appropriately, or core values simply do not match up with what you're being told is actually what matters. And take a moment to write that down. Just take note of what you've seen. Now I'm going to go on to number 5. This is continuous development. You got to do it. I don't know how else to put that. Growth keeps teams ahead. Right? A LinkedIn study had said that 95 or 94% of employees would stay longer at a company if it invests in their learning and development. Right? That's probably no surprise. The real lesson is that people want to learn. People want to grow. Your teams want to work top of license. They want to see a future for themselves in your organization. Right? I remember years ago, I had what I hoped was a mentorship conversation with a much more senior leader I worked with in an organization. And I told him about what my goals were for the future. And what his response to me is sometimes people are exactly where they need to be. So this made it very clear for me that, at least from this leader's perspective, right, they just wanted a busy worker bee in that role that I was in. They did not see the same future for me in that organization that I did. Now, granted, I got promoted 3 times after that, and that leader was gone before I decided to leave the organization. But it's important for people to know they have a future. It doesn't matter if you think they're magnificent in their current role. You got me? What really is important is for them to see that you recognize there's always opportunity to grow. So from having opportunities to lead or to take on more and more challenging, high profile initiatives, maybe to mentorship programs. There are always some simple ways to keep your team growing and competitive. And I'm not even talking about that cost you money. What they cost you is attention, but attention that pays back tenfold, right? Even and especially in rapidly changing spaces. So a couple of quick check-ins for you. A couple of quick check-ins. Is there a clear path for growth in your organization? Is there a clear path for growth that your staff can see, that your team can see? And are you consistently developing your own leadership skills? I know I alluded to this at the beginning, but one of the things that happens when we don't have an aligned team and it feels like everyone is coming to us for every single decision, right? And there's a line outside of our office, is that the first thing that goes is our personal time, our time to develop ourselves, and our time to think about our own careers. So you need to make sure your team is handled so that your career is always handled, because otherwise you will literally sink, right? As quickly as, that swirl of their confusion has you go. So is there a clear path for your team members to grow? Are you investing in developing your own leadership skills? So be honest. And remember, your team is only going to develop as far as you do. Okay. So just a quick recap of the 5 protocols in case you joined us late. Clarity. You need a protocol for clarity, ensuring everyone knows exactly what's expected and why. Communication, so that there's this constant flow and consistent channels of communication. Accountability, so that you're turning commitments into results by making sure everybody understands their ownership, what they're on the hook for, or, to put it more negatively, where I used to work, I don't know if this is good or bad, but it still makes me chuckle. We'd say, we need to know the throat to choke, right? We need to know who is on the hook for that, and they need to know they're on the hook for that. Last thing you want to do is have it surprise someone what they're responsible for. Culture and values, right? This invisible kind of framework that guides how people show up and are expected to engage. Are they clear about the enacted priorities or just the ones on the break room wall that may have absolutely nothing to do with reality today in your organization? And then, of course, continuous development, because you need to invest in your team and yourself for constant growth. Like I said, your team, human beings want to work, for the most part, want to work top of license. And if you're not in medicine, that simply means you want to work at your capacity, right? At your intellectual capacity, so that you are intellectually engaged, right? Yes, you could sit there and just be the person going through the checklist, but is that truly working top of license? Is that engaging you intellectually, giving you opportunities to expand into whatever's next? But together, these 5 protocols, again, so super simple, like I said at the beginning, deceptively, so we often ignore them. They create an intentional environment, right? Where alignment thrives, where you're seen as a leader, right? As an effective leader, where leadership becomes less of a struggle and it becomes more strategic. Frankly, even being a leader can become a strategic advantage when your team is well aligned. So I'm going to, sorry about that, you guys. It looks like I have a call coming through. Okay. So what are the big outcomes? And I wanted to talk about this for a moment because I wanted to make it really tangible. I want you to imagine for a moment how your organization would function if all 5 protocols were running smoothly, your team was aligned, right? You'd have fewer fires to fight because your team is proactive and aligned. You'd actually be working on more strategic levels of work, which actually positions not only you, but your entire team or organization more effectively in your organization or your industry. Because again, if you're down here micromanaging, what are you not doing? You're not up there strategizing. That's the bottom line. Right? If you're down here doing their work, you're not doing yours. We need to cut that out. So you get higher engagement. People know their roles. They see their growth opportunities. They see their future in the organization. Likely they respect your leadership because they don't feel like they're just busy and directionless. Yes. Overall better results across the board, personally, professionally. I'm going to say probably a lot more balance in your life. No more nights and weekends. You can actually unplug for vacations, right? So again, whatever those results are, whether it's improved patient outcomes, higher revenue, bigger market share, whatever the case is. But that is the power of alignment, right? And I touched on those 5 protocols you need, and they're just part of kind of the larger set of leadership competencies, but those 5 are really fundamental. So I want to talk to you about next steps because I want to make sure you turn this into action and aren't just being an insight junkie, right? Listening and nodding and being like, oh yeah, that's so good. And then it does not change the way that you lead. We have enough of that already. So let's translate it into action. So I want you to look at the little self-assessments, scores, and notes you took as we were going, right? Look back at those. And I want you to identify your biggest gap or the one place, the one area where you believe that if you flip that from like a 1 to a 5 or a no to a yes would actually make the biggest difference for your team or potentially for you personally. Right? Is it clarity? Is it communication, accountability, culture, development? What is it for you? Because this is where your clear protocol is going to come in. Again, there's so many different ways to attack each of these. All you need is one. So here's where I want to talk to you about what I'm offering for a few, action takers. For some of you, you already know this resonates and you're already going to run off and you kind of know what you need to do or already know what protocols you're going to, enlist that you have proven and work and just kind of systemize that. But for others who want to see this kind of come to fruition more quickly, I want to take a moment to share something special that I'm offering right now. So I'm running a beta. For those of you who don't know what that is, it's a test for an accelerated 6-week one-on-one executive coaching sprint. And what this is, it's a focused, results-driven sprint. It's designed to help you make real progress on one high priority challenge. So we want to be very focused. 1, maybe max 2 high priorities. This is not for everyone. Right? We only have 7 weeks to have that, that outcome. You get 6 sessions, you have max of 7 weeks. But it's for leaders if you are ready to roll up your sleeves and take action right now. Maybe you're working on, let's say you're positioning yourself for a promotion or finally getting your team aligned so that you can get your time and your sanity back. Or you just maybe need to regain, maybe confidence is the right word, and feel more equipped as a leader, right? So that you start building your influence and your value within the organization. Whatever it is, we're going to zero in on your priority week by week and start implementing that protocol or maybe 1 or 2 that will help you manage your team effectively. And the bottom line, right, the big picture of this team leadership operating system, which was, and I'll show you kind of what that looks like in a second. But what I did was I wanted to actually capture all of the different my philosophies to leadership, but through the proven action and strategies that you apply very quickly. And the bottom line and the purpose of all of that is to be able to manage your team in an hour a week. No nights, no weekends, no doing their work for them, but just manage your team effectively like a high performing team in an hour a week. So that is the ultimate outcome. So this program, it's about making things simpler, more sustainable. It's not about sacrificing your personal time. It's not about working more. It's not about collecting more credentials in hopes that that's going to make you feel better about your job and just try to keep your head above water. So here's how it works. Over 6 weeks, we're going to meet every single week. Each session is going to be laser focused, right? It's going to be on moving you forward on your priority. We're going to tackle the biggest challenges. And of course, we're going to handle any roadblocks or problems that emerge along the way, that pop up as we're going. And I just want to be really clear because this is not, as I mentioned earlier, this is not for insight junkies or people who just want to talk about their problems and their challenges. Right. There will be time for that, but that's not what this is. It's for people who actually want to take action and implement. This is an implementation sprint for leaders, right? Leaders who are ready to implement, try new approaches, and then report back on their outcomes. And because it's a beta, because I've never done this short cycle before, the investment is about 75% less than what I normally charge for this type of coaching. I'm not sharing the price publicly. It's not about the cost, but it's about your commitment to taking your leadership to that next level and not being here in 6 weeks or 6 months or a year from now, having the exact same problems you had last year. You with me? Because as the year gets started, you look back and you got to wonder, has the quality of my problems and challenges at work improved? Or am I still spinning in the same set of problems and complaints I had a year ago, right? The leaders I work with do not do that. The problems don't go away. They just get better. You get to solve better problems. So I've opened up those 10 spots. I'll be meeting with participants who that works for personally every week to make sure that we're making progress. And you can't just sign up. You do actually need to meet with me again to make sure that it's a fit as well. So if you've been feeling stuck, if the idea of another week of, sleepless nights, strained team culture, having your best laid plans hijacked because, your team feels directionless, if that's all too much, I absolutely want to work with you. I want to talk to you. So if this speaks to you, don't wait. I'll show you how to schedule a consultation in a moment. And then we can work together to get those protocols implemented very, very quickly. So I wanted to show you. So this, again, if you're signed up for my session and you're on my list, you're going to get a free sample protocol. This was the first one I put together. It's a 30-minute team check-in protocol. Let me make this bigger. It's a 30-minute team check-in protocol, and it will show you exactly how to run your meeting. I even have a sample script in there and a whole bunch of strategic, tweaks so that you can still follow that approach and get the kind of leadership outcomes you need in the moment, whether it's talking about a shift or change in how your organization's working, changes in accountability, things like that. So I just wanted to show you that. Actually, I think I have another slide in here. These are some of the other protocols. You may or may not be able to read all of these. Let me see if I can hide myself. But just to read some of them off to you, failure planning and obstacle management. And that's just crucial because without an ability to manage failure effectively, you're going to spin out every time something doesn't go as planned. And let's be honest, 90% of the time things will not go as planned. Yes? There's a delegation protocol. I feel very strongly that if you're going to be an effective leader, you need to be able to delegate just like a rock star, right? And it's much simpler than you think. And you'll stop doing it's just easier if I do it myself dance. So I won't read all of these to you, but they're on decision-making, career mobility, right? And making sure that you're doing the right work so that you're getting the right visibility and the right opportunities for your own career. EQ, communications, purposeful one-on-one meetings, because those one-on-ones, we need to make sure that they are actual leadership tools, not just going through the checklist of, did you do all this work? And then I just added this one, demote your bad boss. And that is because so many leaders can feel stuck and almost like they have no options when they're working for a leader or leadership team that's less effective than they'd hope. So this protocol is all about demoting that bad boss or leader and promoting yourself to be center stage in your career so that you're spending more time being intentional and strategic about that. So with all that, if you're ready to simplify, leadership and actually focus on better results, I definitely want to have that conversation with you, see if my beta program makes sense for you. So I'm offering that free 30-minute strategy session. And really what we're going to do there is I'm going to help you identify where you can get the biggest, the biggest impact immediately, right? This isn't like off next quarter sometime. This is where you can have the biggest impact immediately. Impact that not only you'll experience, but your team will experience, and so will your organization. Okay, let's see. So I think that's everything I wanted to tell you. Well, just briefly, during the 30-minute strategy session, I'll also let you know how that team leadership operating system can work for your specific challenge and how we would work together in our 6-week kind of executive coaching sprint, right? So that you can see exactly how to apply it to your team. So now, that wraps up the core of our webinar, but I really want to hear both your questions and your key takeaways. I want you to type them into the chat, even if you have questions about the, consultation or about specific protocol and what I'd recommend, feel free to ask. Also, if it feels as though, let me bring this back over here. If it feels as though this is great, but it won't work in your organization, I want you to push back. Okay? I want you to push back, and I want you to let me know what has you say that so that we can work through it. Worst case, you find it actually will work with some tweaks. So that's what we want to do. We want to make this very simple and straightforward and something you can implement immediately as soon as you close the window for this conversation that we're having. So what questions do you have? This is a great chance to ask about those specific challenges or how to implement these in your unique setting, because we all think that our organization or our role is a little bit of a snowflake. Let me tell you, there are very few snowflakes. So, Christine, since this is, I know Christine had asked about replay. Since this is a LinkedIn Live, you can watch the replay here on LinkedIn. It'll be on my profile. Yeah, and I'm looking back at some of the comments, and yes, I mentioned that about toxic behavior because, again, even really good leaders often sometimes believe that a problem will just resolve itself. Yes? Now, how many of you have been with an organization or a team way too long and the problem did not resolve itself, right? You stayed there for an extended period of time, tolerated whatever that broken culture was because you hoped it would resolve itself. Now, imagine how painful that was when you were a team member, and consider what you would have hoped your senior leaders did. So now that you're the senior leader, it's your chance to address that ineffective way of being in that organization, especially if it's derailing, right, your best team members. Okay, so what questions do you have for me? What questions do you have? And if you want to ask them, privately, I think it lets you do that as well. But drop me your questions, because I really want to be able to address anything that's in the way of you being able to make this work for you now, right? Whether or not we speak, whether or not you work with me, that's not the point. The point is, I want you to take action immediately. So what, if anything, might get in the way of you taking action? Let me go back to some of your comments here. I want to talk about ownership because I know a couple of comments had come up when I was talking about accountability and ownership. So that first step, and where I want you to start with ownership, is I want you to be able to distinguish for yourself with absolute clarity what everyone on your team is responsible for and what they're not responsible for. So if people are coming to you with questions, I want you to start there. Start with those questions that you're getting. You're getting questions from your team that you believe they should have been able to answer. The only reason they haven't been able to answer it is because they may think it's not in their lane to answer it. So I want you to get really clear about what those questions are that they should be able to answer. And start there. Start there with what accountability should look like. I see a question here. So how do you handle a situation where the senior leadership are not taking action on a toxic leader whose behavior is rendering the team ineffective and causing a lot of wastage, and you are sure that they are the problem, right? That he is the problem. Thanks for asking the question. I know for a fact, Robert, you're not the only person who is wondering about this. So here's what I'm going to say about this. I'm going to answer it in a couple of different ways. Yes? So I'm going to answer this in a couple of different ways. One is, let's assume, let me put myself back in here. Let's assume that the organization does not know. Why don't they know? Why aren't they aware? Is it that there aren't open channels of communication? There's not a way for others to safely share the experience that they're having? Or is it, let me see if I can go back to that slide. I think I asked a question, or I made a comment about this earlier. Are you addressing toxic leadership even for your moneymakers? Because what I have found is that if the organization's values are not what the organization says they are, right? And they say that something other than money is what's driving their decisions, but they're not addressing the toxicity or bad behavior of their moneymakers, then you know that's not what's actually driving values or value in that organization. So that's one side of it, assuming they don't know, why don't they know? Make sure that you are in a position to decide when you are done tolerating that ineffective environment. So I'm going to say more about that because the type of leadership that I focus on with my clients is ensuring that you are the center of value, that your value doesn't come from who you're employed by, but rather the other way around, that you are the source of value, you bring the benefit. And so now you're deciding that you're going to bring your value and offer your value in this particular organization, right? So you are the center of value, not the organization. When we get that backwards, what happens is we believe we need to tolerate whatever the organization tolerates. Let me know if that resonates. When you don't recognize yourself and carry yourself and develop yourself, being a leader, senior leader, mid leader, whatever the case is, first time leader, as the center of value, you inadvertently lead yourself to believe you need to tolerate whatever the organization is serving up. Now, not all organizations are created equal, as we know, just like not all, team members or teams or leaders are created equally. So that being said, once you have actually taken actions to ensure that the organization knows what's happening, at what point do you decide to pivot, right? And that's something you're not going to tolerate. I wish we could make organizations do things to our liking. But again, the way that I focus on leadership is focusing on what you control. And what you control is yourself as the center of value. You control how you develop and or shield or support your team and equip your team, no matter what the environment happens to be. You also control at what point you say, you know, that's enough. This is not allowing me to be the leader that I want to be. So it is time for me to make my exit. So again, let me know if that makes sense, because you cannot change someone else's behavior. Right? That is simply not possible. You can lead and you can model so that hopefully that will help spark a change. You can set an expectation. But if somebody is willing to deal with the consequences of not meeting those expectations, not living up to those core values, not having integrity, etc., then what can you do about that if they're willing to face those consequences? One of the challenges I see is that organizations may be willing to face those consequences because they're betting that you are not going to make that pivot, that you will continue to tolerate, and again, eventually things will work themselves out. Don't be that leader. Okay, so I know we're already at time. Any other questions in the chat? And otherwise, again, if you're still here, I'd love to hear what were your key takeaways from the conversation today. If you're not already on my list, that's right, I was going to let you know. If you're not already on my list, you can go to my LinkedIn profile. It'll say to sign up for my newsletter. Once you do that, I'll make sure that you get the free protocol, right? So the leaders on my list are going to get that free protocol. You'll see exactly what I'm talking about. You will use that 30-minute team meeting protocol this week. It will, I guarantee it's going to change how you lead your meetings for going forward and how you think about your team meetings and clarity. So, definitely make sure you're on that list for that. I don't see any last minute questions, so I'm going to wrap it up. And I just really want to thank you so much for joining me today and investing, this hour in your leadership journey. And I want you to remember you're not just learning about the protocols that you need for yourself. You're doing it for your team, for your organization, and ultimately for the people that you serve, right? Whether those are your patients or your clients, etc. If you haven't already connect with me here on LinkedIn. I'm planning to do monthly events again for the rest of this year. And I am looking forward to helping you align your team and have the kind of success that you're looking for without waiting yet another month or year or decade or whatever the case is to have the type of career that you set out to have and to be the type of leader and have the type of organization that you've intended for yourself. Okay, thanks, leaders. Go out there and lead, and I will see you next time.